Hello friends and family, thank you for joining me. Yes, it's been a while since I posted a video. Sometimes life happens and you've got to prioritize, and on this occasion I had to prioritize. So I haven't been able to post a video in a while. Please accept my apologies. Okay, so in today's video we will be looking at adult social care assessments. So we'll be focusing on Care Act assessments in adult social work. So assessing is the only way we can determine whether someone has any needs that we can assist them with. It's the only way we can find out what a person's needs are, if any. Okay, so just to help you to understand why we have to do assessments in adult social work. So to help you understand this, I'm going to present you with a case study. So Adult Social Care Department receives a phone call from a daughter who is worried about her father, and she states the following. I'm very worried about my dad, who's 80 years old. He's having continuous falls following a stroke. He's very unstable on his feet. My dad lives on his own. Due to his health and reduced mobility, he's no longer able to wash himself or prepare his own meals. I'm not able to get to my dad all the time because I have a full-time job and my own commitments. I need some help from my dad. Now, this is typical of the kind of referrals that comes into adult social care on a daily basis. So once someone contacts adult social care, requesting for an assessment, requesting for support, whether it's via telephone, whether it's via an email, whether it's via post, it is called a referral. A referral has been received. If the referral comes in as a phone call to the adult social care department, then the person on the other side of the phone will ask all the relevant questions in order to ascertain or gain as much information about the person's situation as possible. Okay, so usually the initial phone calls and the initial inquiries is not handled by social workers per se. It's usually handled by a team of people that take incoming calls, or the business support officers that take the calls, or the administrative officers that may take the incoming calls. As you can imagine, social workers have to go out on the field to assess people, and they use their skills and expertise to support people in the community. So a social worker only gets involved when it has been established, that it requires the expertise of a social worker to handle. So once the information is gathered by the business support or the administrative officer, the referral will be passed on to the relevant team to action. If it requires a social worker, then it will be passed on or allocated to a social worker in line with the allocations policy. So because the client is new to adult social care, we have to do a full Care Act assessment to gather as much information about the person as possible. Okay, so when we go out and we assess people, we have to cover 10 main outcomes, which is stipulated, which is outlined in the Care Act 2014. So we assess people against 10 main criteria, which I'm going to list in no particular order. So we assess people against, number 1, personal care. Number 2, toileting needs. Number 3, being appropriately clothed. Number 4, managing meals. Number 5, accessing the community. Number 6, being safe at home. Number 7, maintaining a habitable home environment. So that includes cleaning and domestic chores in your home environment. So cleaning and domestic duties at home. Number 8, maintaining family and other relationships. Number 9, any responsibility for children. So if the person has any responsibility for children, you have to outline it in the assessment as well. Number 10, accessing and engaging in work, training, volunteering, and or education. So these are the 10 criteria that we have to assess people against. This is outlined in the Care Act 2014. Okay, I'm going to go through each domain or each outcome, and I'll just briefly go through what it entails and what it's about, just to give you a better understanding of the various outcomes that we assess people against. Okay, so we're going to look at personal care first. So you have to look at the person's personal care needs. For example, is the person able to wake up, get out of bed, have a bath, shower, brush their teeth? Can they do this independently, or do they need support? Do they need just reminding to do it, just prompting? Are they able to do it once they're prompted? So these are all the things that you need to look at when you're covering personal care aspect. The next one is toileting needs. So, are they incontinent? Do they need assistance to access the toilet? Or are they independent with their toileting needs? If the person requires support with their toileting needs, then you've got to state what support or help they require in order to meet this outcome. So, number 3, being appropriately clothed. Now, being appropriately clothed to me falls under the personal care bracket or the personal care umbrella, So being able to dress, being able to choose the right items of clothing to wear each day, and choosing, whether appropriate clothing to wear. Are they able to dress themselves? Or do they require assistance with dressing? Managing your meals, managing meals. So managing meals includes being able to shop for food items, being able to prepare and cook your meals. Okay, accessing the community. So is the person able to access the community, which is going out of their house, leaving their house and going out with support or without support? So accessing the community is about being able to go out to do your shopping, being able to go out to access medical appointments, being able to go out and access social events, recreational, anything outside your home environment. Okay, you also need to look at the mode of the person's transport. So if they're accessing the community, do they drive? Do they go by public transport? If so, do they require assistance of one person to access the community? You need to look at the mobility aids, if any, that they may require. Is the person able to go out independently? Do they require a wheelchair? And if so, does it need to be a self-propelled wheelchair or an attendant-propelled wheelchair? So in other words, do they require someone to push them in the wheelchair, or can they push it themselves? Do they use a walking aid, such as a walking stick, a Zimmer frame, walking frame, a trolley? These are all the areas that you need to look at when you're addressing this section of your assessment. So being safe at home, making use of the home safely. So you need to look at, is the adult able to move around safely within their home environment? Are there stairs in the property? And does that impact on their ability to move around safely in the home environment? Is the property wheelchair accessible? If there are a wheelchair user, is the property wheelchair accessible? If they're a wheelchair user. Is an OT assessment required to look at various equipments to enable the person to be safe at home? Okay. So maintaining a habitable home environment. This is all about cleaning and domestic chores at home. So how does the person manage their domestic chores at home? Domestic chores includes the cleaning and maintenance of your home environment, ensuring that it is clean and safe to occupy, free from hazards, etc. It also includes your laundry. It also includes general cleanliness of the home. It also includes, doing your bedding and your laundry, etc. Maintaining family and other relationships. This outcome is about looking at whether the person is maintaining relationships that's important to them. Are they experiencing isolation? Responsibility for children. So that's the adult that you're assessing. Do they have responsibility for any children? This is where you mention it in your assessment. And you must state how, if they have children, they say they have, you may want to state how that might be impacting on their day-to-day life, if it's applicable. Do not assume that just because the client is an older person, he's an 80-year-old man, so you just assume that he can't have responsibility for children. Actually, you're wrong, because, he's an 80-year-old man. He might have responsibility for his grandchildren. We do come across that. So it's important that you ask all the questions to find out whether or not the client has responsibility for any children. Doesn't have to be his children. He may have responsibility for his grandchildren. So you need to ask all the right questions in order to do your assessment, and don't make any assumptions. Okay. Accessing and engaging in work, education, training, or volunteering. You will need to give a detailed and a clear account of the person's needs in your Care Act assessment that you'll be completing. Okay. So now let's look at the practicalities. So after you've covered all the areas in your assessment, you've completed your assessment. As the assessing social worker or assessing officer, you would need to conclude your assessment by summarizing what your findings are and what your recommendations are. As the social worker, you've done the assessment. What is your recommendation? You must also remember that under the Care Act, a person must meet 2 or more outcomes in order to be eligible for services. They must meet 2 or more outcomes. If the outcome is that the person has eligible needs for support and they meet the eligibility criteria, and you're recommending that the person needs a carer to support them at home because of their needs, for example, then you would need to make that crystal clear in your assessment. You need to make that very clear in your assessment, whatever that you're saying or whatever that you are recommending. Okay, so once you have written up your Care Act assessment, you will need to send it to your line manager to look at it. And if they're happy with it, they will authorize it. If they feel that it requires more work, there is a process which will allow your manager to return the assessment back to you for any changes or any amendments to be made to your assessment. If your manager authorizes your Care Act assessment, then the next stage is the support planning stage. The support planning is pretty much identifying or setting out how the person's needs is going to be met. You would have to complete the support plan and go through a process, which is usually where you'd have to present your case to senior managers and for them to make a decision about the care that is required to meet the person's needs. The process is usually called panel. So once the senior managers agree your care plan for the client, then the next stage would be to get the care started. In most cases, you would have to send a request to the brokerage team or the purchasing team, and in the request, you'd have to stipulate exactly what you're asking them to look for, or what you're asking them to do for you. So, for example, if you want to state any preferences, for example, the client The client might only want male carers or only female carers because of his or her religion. You may want to state a preference for a carer that speaks a particular language because of a language barrier. You can make your preferences known when you are sending the request to the brokerage team or the purchasing team. Okay, so in the same way, if the recommendation, when you've done the Care Act assessment and the recommendation is that, the client moves to a care home where he can receive 24-hour care. And let's say the client has children who live elsewhere, or they live in other parts of England. The client may want to live closer to his children so that he can receive more help and be closer to his family. So again, you may want to ask or request that the brokerage team or the purchasing team look for a placement that is in a particular area or within a particular area because the client wants to be closer to where his family live. So you'll be telling the brokerage team the areas that you would want them to consider when they're looking for a residential placement for that client. When you're doing your Care Act assessment, you also need to look at support they may be receiving from family and friends and all the resources that is available to them. Okay. Please check out my video on strengths-based social work because that will complement this video and it will help you when you're completing your Care Act assessments. Thank you so much for watching me, and I do hope that you've gained something from this video. My next video will be looking at mental capacity assessments. Until next time, take care of yourself, and I will see you in my next video. Take care. Bye-bye.